She was the child they never chose, until the day she made them all watch. The door slammed open and Nola ran, not away from something, toward something. Toward the notice board at the end of the corridor in Federal Government Girls College, Gbagada, her heart hammering, her worn rubber sandals slapping concrete still wet from morning rain that had poured through the broken school roof. She had checked that board every morning for 3 weeks. Every morning, nothing. But today, something about the way her form teacher, Mrs. Okonkwo, had paused at roll call and looked at her, just a flicker, barely a second, told her today was different. Her fingers found the paper before her eyes did. She read her name. Then she read it again. Then she stepped back and stood very still in the middle of that noisy corridor, JSS 3 girls shouting, a teacher barking about assembly, the distant thud of a football on the field, all of it moving around her like water around a stone. Nola Daramola. Selected. Westbridge University Global Scholarship. Full funding. United Kingdom. She did not scream. She did not cry. She just stared at those words the way you stare at something you are afraid to stop looking at, in case it vanishes the moment you turn away. Nobody came. The words stayed. But what was waiting for her at home, in that house in Gbagada Phase 2, that was a different story entirely. The Daramola compound sat on a quiet street off Gbagada Expressway, one of those solid Lagos homes with black iron gates and a small garden that Malem Sewell, the gateman, tended every Saturday. From the outside it looked like everything. The generator was a big one. There were 2 cars. Mrs. Viral drove a Toyota Camry. Her husband's Prado sat beside it, always washed. Mr. Daramola ran an import business out of Apapa. He left before 6 and returned after 8, smelling of traffic and Lagos exhaustion. He was not a cruel man. He was a quiet man. And in that house, his quietness had the same effect as cruelty, because the people who needed him to speak were exactly the ones he stayed silent around. Mrs. Viral ran the house. She was the kind of Lagos woman other women studied from a distance, always composed, always put together, never a hair out of place even at 7 in the morning. She wore her elegance like a warning. She spoke softly and expected to be obeyed without repetition. They had 2 daughters. Lena was the younger one. Fast-talking, bright-eyed, the kind of child who walked into a room and the room turned toward her. She had her father's nose and her mother's cheekbones, and both parents saw themselves in her clearly, so they loved her the way people love mirrors, easily, automatically. Lena was driven to school in the Camry. Lena had a birthday party every year with a canopy in the compound, a DJ, and a cake from that bakery on Acme Road. Nola was the older one. Quiet. Watchful. She walked 40 minutes to school every morning through the Gbagada streets, past the Okada riders, the bread sellers, the women frying akara at the junction. She had stopped asking for a ride in primary 4 because she had learned early that her requests landed differently from Lena's, that her voice occupied less space. She moved through that house like someone who knew they were a guest, careful, never asking for what was not offered. She was 9 years old the first time it broke through the surface. It was a Thursday in November, the kind of hot, flat Lagos afternoon where the air sits on you. Nola had just come second in the inter-school mathematics competition, second out of over 300 students from schools across Lagos State. Her principal had called her name over the assembly PA system that morning. She had carried the certificate home tucked close to her chest, carefully, the way you carry something you have been waiting a long time to show someone. She walked into the sitting room. Her father was watching NTA News. Her mother was finishing a phone call near the window. Lena was on the floor with a coloring book, tongue stuck out in concentration. Nola waited for her mother to end the call. "Mama," she said, holding out the certificate. "Did you see my result? I came second in the whole competition, the whole of Lagos State." Viral glanced at it, not even a full second. "Leave it there," she said, and walked toward the kitchen. "Leave it there, not well done, not let me see." Not even a pause, just leave it there, the way you tell the housegirl where to drop the shopping. Her father looked up from the television. Their eyes met. Nola watched his face the way she always watched faces, looking for the thing behind the thing. She saw something move there, something that wanted to become words and couldn't quite make it. He looked back at the television. Nola set the certificate on the center table. She went to her room. She sat on the edge of her bed and looked at the ceiling, at the small water stain in the corner from last rainy season, and she sat with the feeling until it stopped being sharp. Then she opened her textbook, because that was what she did with feelings that had nowhere to go. She converted them into something that could not be overlooked. The years that followed sharpened her. NEPA took the light for 4 straight days during her WAEC preparation. Nola sat at the window and read by the orange glow of the street transformer light, textbook on her knees, mosquitoes at her ankles. She did not complain. Her school bag tore in SS2. She sewed it back with thread from the kitchen drawer and used it for another full year. Lena had a new bag every September. Lena had an iPhone for her 14th birthday. Lena had a lesson teacher who came to the house twice a week to help with mathematics, a subject in which Nola, with no lesson teacher and a torn textbook, consistently scored higher. "Always so serious," Lena said one Saturday, stretched out on the couch watching Africa Magic, eating chin-chin from the bowl their mother had brought her. "Relax, Jor. You behave like the whole world is on your head." Nola looked up from her book. She looked at her sister, at the ease of her, the way the house arranged itself around Lena's comfort without being asked. "You are right," Nola said simply. Then she looked back at her book. She was not angry. She was building. And people who are building cannot afford to be distracted by people who are not. She was in SS3 when she saw the announcement on the office door, Westbridge University, United Kingdom. Full scholarship, tuition, accommodation, monthly allowance, return flights. 4 years. Open to top percentile candidates from West Africa with demonstrated personal adversity. Nola stood at that door for a long time. Then she wrote the deadline in the back of her notebook, underlined twice. She told no one. She typed her personal statement during lunch breaks in the dusty computer room, alone. She wrote about the walk to school, the streetlight. The torn bag, the certificate left on the center table. She did not write it to earn pity. She wrote it because it was true, and true things carry a weight that readers can feel whether they want to or not. At home, her parents had also heard about the scholarship. But the conversation in the Daramola house was not about Nola. "Lena," Mrs. Viral said at dinner one evening, touching her daughter's hand across the table. "You should apply for this scholarship. This is exactly the kind of thing you deserve." Lena's face lit up immediately. "You think so, Mama? Really?" "Of course. We will get you a lesson teacher for the entrance assessment, someone to help with the personal statement." Nola kept her eyes on her plate of jollof rice. She lifted her fork. She said absolutely nothing. If this story is already touching something in you, if you recognize Nola or you are Nola, hit the like button right now and drop a comment below. You are not alone. Now let us continue. Results day came on a Wednesday morning. The letter arrived by email, which Mrs. Viral had set up on Lena's phone with notifications turned on. The whole family was in the sitting room when the phone buzzed on the cushion. Lena grabbed it. Her mother leaned over her shoulder. Her father sat forward. Lena's face did something complicated. She read the email once, then again. Then she set the phone down slowly, the way people set down things they are afraid of dropping. "I didn't get it," she said. Room shifted. Mrs. Viral straightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Lena stopped. Something moved behind her eyes. She picked the phone back up. She turned and looked directly at Nola. "It has your name, Nola. This email is addressed to you. You applied." Silence that followed was the loudest thing Nola had ever heard in that house. She did not flinch. She had been carrying this quietly for months. She met Lena's eyes, then her mother's, and she said with a calmness that surprised even her, "Yes, I applied." Viral stood up from the couch slowly. Her face had become something unrecognizable. "You did this behind our backs." "I applied for a scholarship," Nola said. "I wrote the essay. I submitted the forms." "Without telling us. Would you have helped me?" The question sat in the middle of the room like a stone dropped into still water. Nobody answered it. Nobody needed to. Then Mrs. Viral said it, the sentence that would hang in the air of that house for years. "You are not going anywhere." And that was when Mr. Daramola stood up. He did not raise his voice. He was not that kind of man. But he stood up from his chair and he looked at his wife with an expression Nola had never seen on his face before, something final, something that had been a long time arriving, like a storm that had been building offshore for years and had finally made land. "She is going," he said, "whether you like it or not." Viral turned to him. "You would take her side." "After everything." "I am not taking sides," he said quietly. "I am doing what I should have done a long time ago. She earned this. She earned it alone with nothing from us, and she is going." Lena looked at the floor. Mrs. Viral walked out of the sitting room. The sound of her heels on the corridor tiles counted every step of her exit. Nola stood very still and felt something she had no name for, not joy exactly, not relief exactly, but something in the space between the two. That night, Nola could not sleep. She lay on her back in the dark and listened to the house settle around her, the hum of the generator, the sound of a neighbor's television through the wall, the night insects outside her window. Then she heard voices from her parents' room. Low, urgent, trying not to carry. She got up. She stood in the corridor in her socks. She listened. She heard her name. Then she heard something else. She was not Mrs. Viral's biological child. She was her father's daughter from before this marriage, from a woman who had existed briefly in his life and was gone. She had been brought to this house as an infant. She had been raised here, fed here, schooled here. But Mrs. Viral had never stopped seeing her as a wound, had never stopped looking at Nola's face and seeing the thing that had nearly ended her marriage before it had properly begun. Nola stood in that corridor for a long time after the voices went quiet. She did not knock on the door. She stood there and let the truth arrive, all of it, and felt it settle the way a stone settles to the bottom of still water. Slowly, finally, without breaking anything, and then something unexpected happened. The cruelty made sense. The distance made sense. The way her name always sounded slightly shorter in her mother's mouth, as if Mrs. Viral was always trying to finish saying it as quickly as possible, all of it made sense now. Understanding is not the same as forgiveness, but it is the beginning of it. And Nola, standing alone in that corridor in Gbagada in the dark, chose to begin. She went back to bed. She slept. She left on a Friday morning in early September. Her bag was not large. She had never accumulated much in that house, had always lived as though she knew she was only passing through. Her father was in the compound. He had arranged a taxi to take her to the airport. He was dressed carefully, as if the occasion required it. Lena came to the door. She stood with her arms crossed, something unreadable moving behind her eyes, shame, perhaps, or the version of envy that lives on the other side of regret. "Safe journey," Lena said. "Thank you," Nola said. Mrs. Viral did not come to the door. At the taxi, her father took both her hands in his. He pressed folded Naira notes into her palm, more than she expected. His face held everything he had never said, all the years of silence compressed into a single expression, into the pressure of two hands at a compound gate on a Lagos morning. "I am sorry," he said, just that. Nola looked at him for a moment. "I know," she said, and she meant it not as absolution but as truth. "I know you are, I see it. It is not enough, but I see it." She got into the taxi. She did not look back as they pulled out of the street, past Malem Sewell at the gate, past the bougainvillea on the fence, past the familiar Lagos morning smells, generator fumes and frying dough and red dust. She faced forward. Looking back slows you down. What followed was not a miracle. It was just Nola doing what Nola had always done, only now with space to do it properly. She arrived at Westbridge in autumn, when the cold was the sharp, clean cold of an English September that makes everything feel like a beginning. She ate alone for 2 weeks. She got lost in the library and found books that changed how she thought about everything. She studied. She asked questions in lectures without embarrassment. She had left behind the house where asking felt like an imposition. She called her father every Sunday, in her second year. Her professor read a passage from her coursework aloud to the entire lecture hall as an example of exceptional thinking. Nola sat in the third row and felt it arrive, the long-delayed sensation of being seen. Not by her mother, not by that house, by the work itself, by the world. By the time she graduated, she had a first-class degree and a job offer from an international development firm with offices in London and Lagos. She had become the someone she had always been quietly constructing in the dark. She went home 3 years after she had left. The house looked the same from outside. The bougainvillea still climbed the fence. Malem Sewell still sat at the gate. But something felt different, smaller. The way places from childhood always feel smaller when you return as an adult and realize the scale was never what you thought. Mrs. Viral opened the door herself. She was older. The sharpness in her face had softened into something more complicated, not quite gentleness, but the look of a person who has spent enough time alone with their own thoughts that the thoughts have started talking back. She looked at Nola for a long moment. "You look well," she said. "Thank you," Nola said. "So do you." They sat in the same sitting room where the envelope had been opened, where her father had stood up, where years of silence had built themselves into walls. Mrs. Viral had made tea. Her hands were not quite steady. "I want to," Mrs. Viral began, then stopped. She set her cup down. She looked at her hands. "I have been trying for years to know how to say it." Nola waited. "I was not fair to you," Mrs. Viral said, her voice very low. I knew it even then, I could not separate you from. She stopped again. I know, Nola said. I understand what I represented to you. Viral looked up sharply. That was never your fault. No, Nola said steadily. It was not. Silence. Is there any possibility? Mrs. Viral's voice broke slightly and recovered. Can you? I understand you, Nola said, gently, clearly, without anger, without the rehearsed bitterness she had once been afraid might live permanently inside her. I understand why you could not give me what I needed, but I no longer need what you could not give. I built what I needed. I gave it to myself. She looked at the woman who had raised her without really holding her, who had housed her without really seeing her. I'm all right, Nola said. I have been all right for a while now. She stood up. She crossed the room. And then, because she was not hard, because she had never been hard, only careful, she placed her hand briefly on the older woman's shoulder. One touch, warm, steady. Then she picked up her bag. She stepped out into the Lagos afternoon, the noise and heat of it, the Okada horns, the pepper soup smell from the mama put down the road, the red dust and the life rushing in to meet her. She did not look back. She walked through the gate, past Malem Sewell, who nodded slowly, and into the street. There is a kind of strength that is built, not given. That grows in the dark, not in the light. That develops in 40-minute walks to school and torn bags sewn back together, and mathematics certificates left on center tables and corridors where you stand alone at midnight and let truth arrive without flinching. Nola Daramola did not become who she was because someone believed in her. She became who she was in spite of the fact that the people closest to her didn't. She was the girl the house forgot. The girl who walked to school while her sister rode. The girl whose name was always the last one called, until the day it was the only one that mattered. She chose herself, before anyone else had the sense to, and sometimes the ones who are not chosen become the ones who change everything. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Like this video so it reaches further. Drop a comment and tell us, are you a Nola? Have you ever had to build yourself alone? We read every single comment. And if you are new here, subscribe and turn on the bell. There are more stories like this one waiting for you. We tell the ones that matter.